Hello and welcome to the Ka0s Tournament Podcast. I'm Fetch. With me is Neko.
Hey everyone.
And Kuma.
Yo.
So, I feel like this is arguably one of the more clickbaity things, but I think it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about the top 10 lists in the format right now. This is a meta snapshot. This is not saying top 10 lists of all time. This is a right now, what are the top 10 lists in the format?
Well, yeah, we don't want to just say Flash 10 times, so... Shuffle Hulk, Breakfast Hulk.
I think there are some modern day lists that would make it on a top 10 of all time and like would beat out Flash lists. But yeah, it'd be a lot of Flash decks. No, but meta snapshot of the current day and age, talking about 2023 and late 2023 meta, basically. This is after Lord of the Rings came out, after Wilds of Eldraine, not that that really added anything. Normally, top 10 lists, you start from the bottom and make your way up. I feel like the top of the list is going to be the least exciting thing here. We're going to make our way top down. Enough stalling. Let's get into it. Number one, for me, is Blue Farm.
I'm shocked. I can't even believe it. That was mine too!
Blue Farm is actually not my number one, and I'll give some highlighting as to why that is when I talk about it.
Okay. I mean, my number one is Blue Farm. I think there are other decks that contend with it. I think it's not like firmly and above number one, but it's been the best deck for so long. It's going to take more than just a good deck coming in to dethrone it from number one for me. It's like it's a great mid-range deck. It's a great turbo deck. It's incredibly flexible. It has so many answers. You've got the 4 best cards in the game. It pretty much does everything.
Yeah, I think it's the best combination of proven track record, powerful cards, powerful strategy, and flexibility that you're going to get. If it has a weakness, it's that everybody knows exactly what you're playing when you set down Timna and Kraul, and they probably, target you pretty accurately when they should and take you out. Everyone knows what you're doing is what I'm basically trying to say here. So if the deck has a weakness, it's that everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows how to take it apart. And as soon as you set down those two commanders, they're going to be gunning for it.
When the weakness to your deck is that it's the best deck in the format and everyone knows it, it's not that big of a weakness.
I agree, but it's not nothing either.
But, I mean, Neko's got something else as number one, so go ahead and take it.
So, I think another really popular contender for this list, as my number one, I have Tivit. So, I think right now, looking at our current meta, Tivit is very well positioned. It gets you so much advantage, so much value, has a win con in the command zone essentially or 1-card win con. Ward, I think, is very powerful. It's so hard to remove. Very hard to kill with Bowmasters, which is a big threat for a lot of creatures currently. You have access to probably the 3 best color combination right now in cEDH. You have Tally and you have the One Ring. You just have all that value compact into a combo piece in the command zone. The deck's been performing consistently, getting multiple top placements. I think it really is, right now, the best deck in the format.
I respect it a lot, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's on my list, but I don't have it near the top. Maybe before we get too into this, we should kind of talk about what our criteria was for how we put things on our list, just to kind of give context. I'm guessing if Neko's got Tivit first, he probably has slightly different criteria for putting decks on his list than I do. So do we want to maybe talk about that for a second before we get any deeper?
I mean, for me, it's a combination of performance in tournaments, across multiple tournaments, different sizes, all that, as well as just like the power level of the deck, how I think it's positioned in the meta specifically, how basically, if I sat down at a table, which deck do I think is going to be the most impactful at the table? That's for me what it is. And like the meta definitely plays a part into that, in my list at least.
Yeah, it's not radically different from what I did. I'll be honest with you, as like the resident statistician data guy, I kind of went on EDH top 16 and very heavily weighted the results there into my list. Now, I didn't just, go by the most top 16s or, the highest conversion rate. But I kind of looked at that, and there were a few decks I was planning to put on my list when I actually looked at the top 16 conversion rate. I was kind of shocked how low it was, and I was kind of like, oh, maybe this deck's not as good as I think it is. So I put a lot of emphasis on that. That wasn't the whole thing, though. I weighted number of played in tournament more heavily than conversion rate. Because if, like, 2 people bring a deck to a tournament and they both top 16, well, 100% conversion rate, best deck in the format, it's like, no, I'm going to rate that less highly than a deck that, 300 people played and maybe 25% got into top 16 with. So I do weight probably number 1, how many people played it. Number 2, what was its conversion rate. Number 3, kind of my own personal biases a little bit. It's well documented on this podcast what kind of decks I think are good and what isn't. And that's more or less how I came up with my list.
For me, I definitely looked at some statistics as well. EDH Top 16 was a great resource for that, like UFO highlighted. But another big contender, or another big reason a deck made it on my list in the position it did, is how well I feel it can perform in the current meta. And right now, we are in the mid-range value meta. Decks that are doing well are the decks that can get that value either in the command zone or in the 99. People have called it a Ristic study meta. That's not far off from the truth, in my opinion. And that my list kind of highlights the decks that get the most value, in my opinion, at least.
I think people are way too high on Mardu Summer. We are past the summer. We're into the fall. It's value fall right now. Like, it is all about that Ristic, that One Ring, so many value engines. And yeah, I absolutely agree. By the way, quick thing. None of us have shared our list with each other. We're going into this not knowing what other people picked. So if you get a surprise, that's why. That being said, number 2, Neko, I pretty heavily agree with you on Tivit being one of the best decks, which is why I have Tivit as number 2.
Wow, you guys are a lot higher on Tivit than I am, that's for sure. It's on my list, but it's not that high.
Tivit is just so good at so consistently getting value. And if you're wanting to play a control-y game plan, Tivit does that exceptionally. If you want to play a little bit faster, you can. It's definitely not a turbo deck by any means. But if you want to, you're still blue-black. You still got, having Dimir just gives you so much, just in general, but so much to go fast as well as so much to control. And then as was brought up by Neko, Esper is just brutal. Esper is so good at getting you value. Yeah, it's not as fast as Mardu or Grixis, but it is so good at getting you value and getting you consistency, as well as you have the best interaction. Just straight up, you have the best interaction.
Yeah, going fast isn't as relevant as it used to be. Now it's more about keeping up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll say this about Tivit. The deck is definitely trending up. There's a good chance if we revisit this in 6 months, Tivit will be much higher on my list. For being around a relatively short time, it's got 193 placings. 193 players playing it on EDH Top 16. It's got a conversion rate of about 20%, which is not super amazing. Give you an idea of a couple of the decks around it in 20%. You got Kinnan at 19.5. You got Dargo Thrasios at about 20.6. You got Malcolm Tana at about 20. So it's in solid company, but I don't know if I'd put it in elite company yet. I'd want to see a few percent higher, I think, before I'd be willing to put it at the top of my list. But it could very well get there. This deck is insanely popular right now. Having 193 placings, despite being a pretty new card, is pretty impressive. The deck is definitely trending up, and I could easily see me being the low one on this in a few months.
Kuma, you're gonna get upset at the rest of my list.
I just named your 3, 4, and 5, didn't I?
Not quite, but not far off.
Oh my god! I knew I was gonna get upset at your guys' lists in here. I'm here for it. Let's go.
I was ready for the Kuma spice today, that's for sure.
Anything else you want to say about Tivit, or should I give my number 2?
I just think Tivit is pretty amazing at being consistent in whatever it does. So
yeah, I love the deck. Don't take this as I don't like the deck. I'm just not ready to call it the first best deck in the format.
Fair enough. Alright, Kuma, bring us your spice.
All right, so after thinking about it a little bit more, I maybe should have had this one a bit lower on my list, but it definitely belongs there. My number 2 I had on my list was RogSi. And the reason for that is, I feel like it's kind of like Blue Farm, but even more turbo, right? The deck is probably the most consistent, fastest gun in the West, right? If you want fast wins, that's probably your best, most consistent way to do it. And, again, if the deck has a weakness, well, this one probably has 2 weaknesses. If this deck has a weakness, it is that if it does get stopped early, it doesn't grind especially well. It's not as bad as people think, but it doesn't grind especially well. And again, it's another one of the boogeymen of the format, that once you put Rog and Sideless down, everybody knows exactly what you're up to, and if they can stop you, they will probably try to stop you. That is not a deck you're going to play and get underestimated. But I think it's got the track record to put it here. If we are indeed heading into a mid-range meta, it's possible it needs to fall down a few places. But on the strength of its track record, the players behind it, and just the raw speed of the deck, Mike Tyson says everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. I feel like RogSi is the best deck at just punching someone in the face. And I think, a lot of theory crafting happens, but often the guy who just had the turn 2 just gets it. And so I have RogSi at number 2 for those reasons.
So you mentioned the track record of RogSi, and it's kind of for that reason that I don't have it on my list at all.
Oh, dang.
I think that RogSi does very well until you put it into the top 16, and then it struggles hard because it punishes players, it punishes the meta. Players who don't know how to play against it are going to be punished by it, but once you get against the really skilled players, it just struggles to actually get those wins in.
I kind of see where you're coming from there.
Yeah, Kuma, if you asked me 6 months ago what my rating was for top 10, I'd probably be agreeing with you here. RogSi, terrifying deck. But right now, it feels like it just does other things, but it does what other decks do, but worse. From my perspective. RogSi, don't get me wrong, still one of the best turbo decks in the format. I don't think turbo is positioned that well in the format right now.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think it is the turboest turbo deck.
Really?
I think that there are other decks that are faster.
Are there decks that are faster that are remotely overall as good?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to know what those are.
I think if you want to play turbo right now, obviously RogSi still not a bad choice, but I think Mardu might actually be the better turbo because Mardu gets around a lot of the hate pieces that RogSi doesn't. Depending on what you're playing for Mardu, you either have better interaction and card draw in the command zone, or you've got some kind of value engine. RogSi, you get mana, yes, which is fantastic. Silas doesn't really do anything. Yeah, he technically gets you artifacts back, but that doesn't come into play almost ever. If that's coming into play, it's because you messed up.
RogSi is also kind of going through a bit of a metamorphosis from what I've heard. Players are trying to make it work in the current meta, and that's actually involving putting in some more mid-range pieces. For people talk about the One Ring, people talking about putting Talion in the deck, these 4 CMC cards into an Adnos deck, just so that it can grind value and get its window.
Well, and I feel like there's a lot of people that are, you can't put 4 CMC cards into Adnos. Yes, you can. You absolutely can.
Yeah, there's way too much made of that in this format. Oh my god, that costs how much mana? You can't play that. It's yes, I can. Do the math.
But I do think there is kind of a split happening with RogSi of people that are going, it's no, I'm going to form, the turboest turbo deck that I possibly can in these colors. Or you're having people that are going more the wheel route, where it's okay, I've got Narset, I've got Notion Thief, I've got Bowmasters, I've got all of this, value stuff, where I can make it where other people can't do their game plan as much, and I'm not as full all in. And I think that's kind of hurting RogSi, because it means that it doesn't currently have the same level of, locked-in goodness that it used to.
Yeah, entirely possible. I did say, upon reflection, it maybe should have been a couple spots lower, but I did weight track record pretty heavily, and the deck's got a hell of a track record. And
it's not bad. It's not bad.
It does struggle in top 16s when you've got 3 strong players who can, talk through threat assessment with each other. But if you look at the people who play this deck in the format still, it's a list of some of the strongest players we have. So if strong players are still playing the deck, I don't think you can completely count it out from top of the meta here.
RogSi is far from a bad deck. Like, don't get me wrong. RogSi is still absolutely amazing. And probably, if not... No, I'm not even going to say probably. It's the best Grixis deck.
I agree.
And Grixis is really good.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not a bad deck. It's a good deck. And just because a deck isn't on my list doesn't mean it's bad. There are so many good decks right now, so much flexibility in what you can play in the meta, that some decks that have made a couple appearances in top 16s just aren't making it to my list because the pool is just so deep right now.
Oh yeah, I think the top 30 decks right now are better than the top 10 decks like a year ago. Like, post Flash banning, the top 30 decks now are more powerful and more refined than whatever we had back then, pretty much.
All right, so for my number 2, I have Najeela. So 5 color, a lot of flexibility in what you can do. Again, you have combat combo potential, you have Adnos potential, you have breach potential, you have Thassa's Oracle that you can rely on. So many avenues that you can win the game, plus being able to play all these really good cards. And I think that the deck has been performing well. I know that it's a deck that can get hated out, especially if people do put a lot of focus on removing Najeela. And it's possible we'll see that happen again as the deck gets more focused. But right now, the deck's just getting those results, and I think number 2 is a really good spot for it.
Yeah, I absolutely love Najeela, and I've been playing her forever, and she's pretty high on my list as well. But I think the biggest knock against her right now is that in mid-range meta, the board is just full of X2s, which just make it so hard to get Najeela rolling. And if you can't get Najeela rolling, you're not the best deck in the world at playing an Adnos game or whatever your backup plan is. So the deck is still incredibly powerful. Like, it still gets played in tournaments. It has a pretty good conversion rate, and you can only be so bad in 5 colors. But I think the primary Najeela plan in the current meta is a little bit stymied by there being lots of creatures on the board.
Yeah, I agree. I think Najeela, the meta is not great for it right now. I still think Najeela is probably the best 5-color deck, although nowhere near as far and away best as she used to be. But
I'll give you a little
Najeela,
spoiler. She's not the best 5-color deck on my list.
Honestly, I can't blame you. I think Najeela is still really good, though. I just don't think it's quite what the meta is wanting right now, if that makes sense.
I agree, and for the reasons you kind of mentioned, Kuma, the bodies on board make it hard, so really prioritize an early Najeela. I think if you can get that down early and get ahead with it, really strong, but attention's going back on it. We saw this before with it, right? Like, the original Najeela did well, got hated out, same thing happened to Winota, same thing happens to a lot of these decks, so you have to be able to handle that pressure. And I don't know if Najeela will be able to do it this time, but I'm curious to see how it does handle it going forward.
That's fair. I'm going to go on to my number 3, which I feel like Kuma's going to get very upset about. And honestly, I might be overrating. But I'm putting Kinnan at number 3.
Excuse me, I need to throw up.
While he does that, Fetch, we stand in solidarity. You are not alone here.
Oh!
You guys are nuts.
You put Kinnan at number 3 above Blue Farm?
I did, yeah.
Okay, I want to hear your reasoning behind that. Because I'm like, okay, Kinnan's a powerhouse deck right now. It's really good. You've got some really good pilots playing it. But my number 3 is like, I'm not sure if I'm putting it too high, because I might be. You're putting it above Blue Farm. You got to explain that to me.
So for a lot of the reasons I value Tivit, I value Kinnan for the same way. It is a commander that enhances what your game plan is, plus gives you additional advantage. You accelerate in your mana, you have access to some crazy big powerful creatures that you can just pull from your deck. I think the win cons can be a little touchy sometimes. I think people need to include more than just Finale Devastation, but what players have been able to do with this deck and the results that they have been getting have kind of spoken for themselves, I feel. We constantly see people making top 16, if not top 4 with this deck.
I'm so glad you mentioned results, because now I can talk about the results. So, Kinnan has 174 placings on EDH top 16. It has a 19.5% conversion rate. It is, let's see here, it's just above Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin, just below Sauron the Dark Lord, that's only 5 games. It's a little bit below Rog Tevesh. It has the 73rd highest conversion rate on EDH top 16. And to me, that's not because it's the boogeyman of the meta and everybody correctly plays against Kinnan. No, I don't think you can say Kinnan's a boogeyman the way something like Blue Farm or RogSi is a boogeyman. I just don't think that outside of the hands of a couple of pilots, it's all that great of a deck. I mean, I've gone out length of this podcast about why I don't like it, but I really think it's a couple of people who really like the deck who are strong players propping up what's otherwise a pretty mediocre list. It might be in my top 20 if I was honest with myself, but spoiler, it will not be in my top 10.
I get that. I just feel like I understand Wounded is insane and one of the greatest pilots in our format, but the fact that Wounded top 16s every event that they play in, how can you say it's oh, this is a bad deck?
I'm not saying it's a bad deck, I'm just saying it's kind of mid, maybe a little bit overrated.
I guess that's fair, but still.
The deck's fine, don't get me wrong, I just don't worship it like so many other people in this format do.
No, I get that, but I think if you look at some of the results this deck has been getting, it's all across the board. First placement, second placement, third placement, fourth. It can really dominate the top 16 in terms of results. If you look at a lot of the more recent tournaments as well, maybe it's recency bias on my part, but I really think the deck is strong. I think it's resilient. I think it can play under a lot of pieces very well.
Doesn't play under my Collector Roof very well.
Who's running Collector Roof anymore except Kuma?
Kuma over there in the corner, the old man being guys, Stacks is good, I swear.
I play Magic the way Richard Garfield intended. One spell a turn, no fast artifact mana.
If you're ever in a game when there's an Orcish Bowmaster and a Collector Roof on the board at the same time, yeah, Kinnan's dead in the water, but until then...
Yeah, and until you get both of those, it doesn't really matter, because Kinnan plays around Bowmaster really well.
One's usually enough to buy you time to get the second, and you don't absolutely need both if you have other lock pieces.
That's true. Alright, Kuma. Enough dissing Kinnan. What's your third?
Okay, so my third is one I would be surprised if it's on either of your lists at all. I kind of surprised myself with this one. This was one I kind of looked at and was you know what? That is probably a much better deck than I think it is. So, now I'm going to promise you something here. My list is not 10 Grixis decks. I was very tempted to make it 10 Grixis decks for the meme, thinking that, even a not top-of-the-line Grixis deck is still probably better than most of the piles people bring to tournaments. I didn't do that, but my third deck is also a Grixis list, and my third deck is Kraul Tevesh.
Okay. I'm just going to say, just because we have one really good pilot with it doesn't make... You're talking about how it's oh, Kinnan, there's only a handful of good pilots, and that's why it's a really good deck. Okay, yeah, Sharky's insane. Don't get me wrong. But,
It isn't just Sharky. Unless Sharky's playing in every tournament there is, the deck has 46 placements and a 28% conversion rate. That's really, really good.
Sharky does play in a lot of them, though.
Maybe I'm getting hit by the fact that Sharky plays in more tournaments than I think, but having 46 entries on EDH Top 16 at a 28% conversion rate is really impressive. And the more I thought about it, I can kind of see why. I play a lot of Rograk Tevesh myself, and a Tevesh on turn 1 or even turn 2 sometimes is just silly good in this format. It's just silly. Top-tier decks can't beat it. And when you add blue to the mix, instead of being a Mimi stacks deck like Rog Tevesh is, you get Kraul and Tevesh. Tevesh protects your life total extremely well. It draws you cards extremely well. You can make the deck all fast mana because you have so much gas in the command zone. The more I thought about it, I'm I think this deck is being slept on, and I am very comfortable saying that that's probably a top 5 deck in the format. I even have it as high as third.
I absolutely agree that it's being slept on. I don't think it breaks top 10. I think top 20, absolutely. I think it's an absolutely slept on deck. I think more people should be aware of it. More people should be playing it. Top 3, that's a bit insane.
I did say my third was a bit of a hot take, and it's possible I'm a little bit high on it, but the more I thought about it, I'm like, the numbers on EDH Rec, plus my own experience casting early Teveshes, I'm like, I can actually think this deck is pretty good. I might be a little high, but I think it's definitely in the top 10 for sure, and I don't think 3 is that big of an exaggeration if it even is.
3 is a very wild spot for this deck, but that's all I'll say on it for now.
Oh, you've got it in your top 10 too.
I didn't say that, and you can't prove that otherwise.
Oh, I look forward to this. I'll say right now, it's not in my top 10. It did not make it. It was close. I did consider it, but it did not make it. But 4, no surprise, Najeela. I thought about Najeela being in 3rd, but I think Najeela just... It's not the right spot in the meta for it right now.
Yeah, I can see that, and I may have valued it too highly. It may fall down, but I think it's still worth the top 10 at least, and top 4, top 2nd. Those are words that I just said.
I mean, the fact that I'm putting Najeela as top 4, and I'm saying I don't think it's in a good spot in the meta, kind of shows how powerful the deck is. But, yeah, I think... I understand, Kuma, why you placed a different 5-color list above this one, but I think Najeela is just, it's a proven deck. It's been around for a long time. It's been a powerful deck for a long time.
Yeah, and the thing about Najeela is we kind of have a weird relationship, because I'll get down on the deck for a while, I'll just be like, this deck is not as good as people think it is. I don't know why people think this is good. I'll like put it down for a while, then I'll pick it back up and be like, oh yeah, this actually is really good. And like, for all its flaws, it just finds a way to win. Like, they call it Najeela Tempo, and I think that's more reflection not on it being an actual tempo list in the 60-card sense of the word, but, like, in tempo in that it finds a way to win. It stays in the game just enough, keeps your opponents off balance just enough to sneak that win in there. And it's not always pretty. Like, Najeela doesn't, come home with a one-punch KO, right? Najeela comes home all beat up and bloody from, 17 rounds of bare-knuckle boxing, but she comes home a winner more often than not. Like, the deck just has staying power, and it's better than I think it is quite a bit of the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's why I couldn't move it lower than 4th. I thought about it being 3rd. I thought about it being lower. I just couldn't bring myself to bring it any lower than this. It's just so consistent.
Yeah, and it's going to be coming up pretty soon for me, but not in 4th. I have a different deck 4th. I have Atraxa 4th, actually.
Oh!
I like it.
That's pretty spicy.
Yeah, I mean, this might be a little bit higher than you guys have it. I'd be very surprised if neither of you included this deck in your top 10 lists, but Atraxa has been doing extremely well recently. This is a case where doing well recently carried a little more favor with me than I otherwise was gonna. Like, I was looking at the list, and I'm like, I really want Thras Timna in here somewhere. I think people are sleeping on Thrasios Timna. But then the more I looked at how Thras Timna's been doing and how Atraxa's been doing, I'm like, you know what? I think Atraxa's actually pretty good. Let me pull up the EDH rec numbers on it just real fast here. So Atraxa has 100 listings on here and a 24% conversion rate. That is well above average, and that is a pretty good sample size. And honestly, I think as time's gone on, it's had even more and more top penetration than it did in the past. And this is a list people are still kind of figuring out and settling on too. So I think there's even a little more left in the tank once people finally sort of agree on a list for this deck. But I mean, it just does everything. You cast your commander on like turn 2 with surprising regularity, draw a gazillion cards, play a Displacer Kitten, and then just the game's over. And you get to play like all the best interaction in the format. Like, to me, this is what Kinnan wishes it was, right? Kinnan powers out his commander on turn 2, passes the turn, plays some mana dorks the next turn, maybe eventually digs for a win. Atraxa just goes and screws the prom queen.
Okay, you say Kinnan powers out its commander on turn 2.
Yeah, I say that loosely. Kinnan, it just casts it.
That's
Kinnan doesn't power anything.
Kinnan is the power source. No, but I do think Atraxa is a good deck. I definitely didn't rate it as highly as you did, but I do think it's a really good deck, and I think it has a lot of opportunity for growth. But correct me if I'm wrong here. Have you put Tivit in your top 10?
Yeah, it's in there. It's in there. No, it's definitely on my list. It's on my list.
You put Atraxa higher than Tivit.
Yeah. I think Atraxa's done better than Tivit recently. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right. I think you can make an argument for it being higher.
Also, you know how I am about colors, right? It has one more color than Tivit, so I'm going to give it some credit there, even if it is the quote worst one.
I should have realized 4 colors is greater than 3
There's
colors.
a lot of colors in my top 10 list. I'll just put that out there. There is a 2-color deck in there, though. There is a 2-color deck on it, though, but it's not Tivit, or it's not a Kinnan. There is a 2-color deck in my top 10, though.
I'm predicting the Obnix. Let's go. I don't
guess.
expect. Wait.
No, I'm not saying you're right. I'm saying it's a pretty good guess if you know me. If you know me and the things I say, that's a good guess. I'm not saying you're right.
Is it wrong, Tevesh?
We'll get to it when we get to it.
I wish that deck was top 10.
Neko, what have you got?
Number 4, Blue Farm.
Okay, finally.
Yeah, if it got much lower, I'd be a little scared.
Yeah, I mean, the deck is good for a reason, right? It's gonna make the top 5, no doubt. The reason I have it lower than you both is the reason Blue Farm was so good for so long. It could get value better than any other deck in the format for a very long time. If a Blue Farm player got their engine online, they would be sitting with 12 plus cards at the table, and you would just not be able to stop them. And since then, like, the deck has just gotten more value pieces. Talion, the One Ring, so much that you could be doing right now. Shieldred, I think, could be good. People, I think, and this is my opinion again, I think mid-range is really good. It gets all these good pieces. The reason that it's lower is it's not the king of the playground anymore in terms of value. So many decks right now can keep up with that value and compete with it, with cards in hand, with win cons, with value in the command zone. There's just a lot of stuff going on right now, and while the deck is really good, while it will keep toss placing, while it has placed in top 16, top 4, heck, it won a tournament pretty recently, it's not the only one in the ring. And I think it's worth noting that, and kind of why I placed it where I did.
I understand. I just don't think it's been dethroned hard enough to drop, but I get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's very possible we've seen a top 4 where we've had my top 4, right? Tivit, Kinnan, Najeela, Blue Farm. I think we've casted those games before.
I'm pretty sure I've casted that at least once.
Yeah. Right, and you can make an argument that any of them are above the others, in my opinion. But that's just kind of where I see it right now.
Yeah, I respect it.
I can't say it's unreasonable to put it there. I mean, I think it's possible Atraxa is a better value deck. I don't think it's quite as fast, which I do seem to prize a little bit more than you guys do, like the pure speed, which is kind of surprising because I'm the stacks player, but...
I know, you'd think. But no. I think it makes sense. At least getting in the top 4. But I'm gonna go on for one of my spicier ones. I might be overrating this deck pretty heavily. I don't think I am. I mean, maybe by like 1 or 2 points. My 5th place deck is Dargo Thrasios. I think this deck is insane.
I mean, I definitely had that in consideration for top 10. I'll leave it as a, to be seen whether I actually put it in there or not. Like, I do think the deck is very good, and I do think it's slept on. That said, I think 5th is pretty generous on that. I think it needs to be a good handful of places lower.
You're probably going to be like, oh, but the colors are bad, and the win rate is only, or like the conversion rate, I think, was like 20%.
I mean, I can say those things if you'd like me to. It's got better in all those things than Kinnan, which you put 3rd. I'll just put that out there.
I think Dargo Thrasios is one of the harder decks, one of the hardest good decks in the format to pilot. I don't know if it's the hardest, but it is up there. It is a very challenging deck to pilot. There's a lot of flexibility that you have to be able to like do different lines and adjust on the fly and figure out what's the best option. But Dargo Thrasios just does some dumb things. And it's some dumb things that other decks don't do.
So I will give you this. I think Dargo Thrasios is the best Thrasios deck right now that we've seen constructed. People are innovating other lists, but I think Dargo Thras is the best at this current time. With that said, I think, in my opinion, it's more a case of the pilot doing very well with the deck. Other people trying to other people trying to imitate that success and not having the same results. So yes, the deck is good, the deck is strong, but like RogSi, I wasn't able to put it in my top 10.
See, I normally would agree with you on the like other people trying to take a deck that has been brought by one good pilot, but if you are playing Dargo Thrasios, you need to really understand the deck to be any good with the deck. Like, anyone can pick up Blue Farm, and even if you're not a good Blue Farm player, you're gonna at least be able to get a win. Like, it's a powerful enough deck, and it's I'll say straightforward enough deck where you can just pick it up and play with it, and it's not going to be the end of the world. Dargo Thrasios does not have that. Dargo Thrasios, you need to be someone who's confident with the list to be any good with it. And so I think a lot of people pick it up because it's like, oh, this is a really powerful list. And then we'll play it and not do well with it and then drop it. And I think you need to push through that initial learning to get where this deck becomes terrifying.
I mean, I'll say this. I had a deck that's very similar to what you described that I was planning on putting much higher on the list. I ended up dropping it down considerably. Because I'm one of those guys who thinks the harder your deck is to play, that is just pure downside. Like, maybe you can do some amazing things with it. Maybe if the board is exactly this combination of hate pieces, you have a 17-step line to get through it. But honestly, the more games you play in a day, the less your ability to pilot your incredibly complicated monster is going to be. You know what's really easy to do after 5 rounds of Magic? Cast an ad nauseam. You know what's not easy to do? A 10-step Dargo Thrasios line. So to me, decks that are just extra compy, even if they have like some really good things they can do, and in theory they're powerful, if you play them like for hours on end, your ability to pilot them is going to fall off massively. At least it has in my experience, anyway.
And I'll admit, I probably overrated the deck. Like, I probably, this should not be a top 5 deck, but I just think so many people underestimate Dargo Thrasios.
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
think it needs to be thought about.
For sure, I like the deck. Like, it's in the running. I'm not going to say if I have it or not. Like, it was definitely a strong consideration, and it may or may not have made the back end of my list. So, like, I totally respect the deck. It's just I think 5 is too much for it.
Yeah, I think that having in the top 10, I don't hate at all. 5th is a bit spicy. We're going from mild to hot here, but I don't hate it.
Alright, that's enough of my spicy takes. Neko, what do you got for your 5th?
Sisay Weatherlight Captain.
Dude, so do I.
Nice. Yeah. All right, Kuma, you start us off.
All right, so Sisay Weatherlight Captain. This is a deck I've infamously hated for a very long time, and then I finally found a list that wasn't just 30 crappy legendary creature ball, and actually kind of fell in love with the deck. Like, I was a huge fan of original Sisay. That's not really relevant to this. I do like the character. I like that the deck is good. But yeah, Sisay is the highest rated 5-color deck I have on my list. And it's just simply a combination of results and just the raw flexibility of the deck. Now, the deck is not a toolbox deck. People want to think it's a toolbox deck because your commander tutors. It really isn't. In my opinion, it's a Dockside Extortionist combo deck and one of the best ones. It is your commander's an outlet for infinite Dockside. It can help you assemble infinite Dockside. Dockside is generally, I think, the number one thing you want to do with the deck, and you kind of have weird Planeswalker combo as a consolation prize. And to me, like, the more I play it, the more I realize just how consistently it can threaten wins. You know, how much your commander's often a false tempo piece. You got to look at the Sisay, you better kill this, I'm going to combo, snap Emil and Dockside out of your hand. Like, the deck just does all sorts of things that I like, despite it not really being very toolboxy, despite it not really being all that stacksy. For me, it's the best 5-color deck on combination of results and just how much I like playing it and how much it just feels like it's easy to win with.
I agree. It's incredibly resilient. It's very powerful. It's very flexible. While it's not a straight toolbox, it is in emergency situations, it toolboxes.
Yeah, if I'm toolboxing, I'm feeling very desperate about my game state. My plan is almost never to toolbox. It is to get to a combo.
Yeah.
If I have to, it's like, okay, fine, but this is not what I want to be doing with the deck, yeah.
It's a combo tutor that can search for answers. That's what it is.
Yeah, I've tutored up an Ashiok before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, minor spoilers. This is my number 6 and probably should have been my number 5. I just wanted to give some respect to Dargo Thrasios. But Sisay right now is a really good deck. Yeah. And I think the current meta suit Sisay amazingly.
I think most metas suit Sisay pretty amazingly. I started playing this deck back when it was like the rule of law meta, like stacks were abundant, and the deck can just play under them so well. The ability to present a win without having to cast a single spell is boggling. Like, even winning at instant speed, like the deck can do so much. It can present so many different combo lines. The cards have synergy with one another in the deck. There are multiple ways that you can build it. Each have their own flair, and each have, I think, a very successful win path. I think that 5 colors is good. I think that you can play things like Rhystic Study, Fish to get the value going. It's gotten some really good pieces like Tivar. The Planeswalker combos I've loved all along, and people are starting to recognize them as good. The deck's getting its results, which is awesome. I can talk about this deck for a long time. Suffice to say, I think it's just really good for the things that you both have mentioned so far.
We are very aware. I'm honestly surprised that Sisay was this low on your list.
Listen, I'm realistic. I know the deck struggles. You need to know the deck, you need to know the lines, and you need to know how to pivot.
Yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve, but I don't think the deck is rocket science. It's not the easiest deck to pick up, but it's not like, an Inalla or a Dargo Thrasios, I guess. It's not quite that hard. It's not as hard as people think it is, but there is a bit of a learning curve.
I would argue it is because it's so different if people aren't familiar with its playstyle.
I would say that Sisay is the other, good, complicated deck. Like, Dargo Thrasios, I think, is slightly more challenging to pilot, and I'd put Sisay a little bit below it. As far as, level of complicated, not necessarily as power level, even though on my list I put Dargo Thrasios right above it.
Well, for what it's worth, I think Neko got it exactly right.
I agree. I think Kuma did as well. Fetch, do you know what deck you could run both Thrasios and Dargo in?
What are you going to go for here?
Sisay. You can run it Sisay.
What?
Not wrong.
What Sisay lists are running Dargo in the 99?
I didn't say they were. I said you could.
I mean, you're definitely more creature ball in Sisay than I am, but even that's got to be too much for you, right?
No, I'm Walker heavy.
Oh, okay. I've already said my number 6. One of you two take it.
All right, I'll do mine because it'll be real fast. I had Najeela number 6.
Okay, yeah. We've
already talked about Najeela. I think this is a pretty good spot for her. I think Sisay just works a little bit better because it's less dependent on what your opponent's board state is. But I mean, I've already said plenty about the deck. I think 6 is a pretty good spot for it.
I respect it, yeah. Mm-hmm. Neko, what's your 6?
6 for me is Atraxa. Again, for a lot of the reasons we discussed before, I do have one spicy take to add to this list because it needs to be said. Up until the printing of the One Ring, Displacer Kitten was the best printed card for cEDH since it hit the shelves.
Okay, as in it's the best printed since other cards came out, or
so since Displacer Kitten was printed, it was the best card for cEDH in the 99 until the printing of the One Ring.
Okay. I understand what you're saying.
Are we talking about from the start of the format around 2016-ish or something?
No. So Baldur's Gate came out June 2022, and from that date until the printing of the One Ring, Displacer Kitten was, I think, king. It does so much for the health of the format. It allows so many unique strategies like Atraxa, like Tivit, and it just doesn't get the appreciation it deserves. And I know we talked a lot about Atraxa, so showing the best Kitten some respect.
I was just trying to make sure you weren't saying that Kitten was a better card than Breach.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think Kitten got a little bit miscast when it first got printed. I think when it first got printed, people were trying to throw it into Blue Farm and stuff. And while it can work there, I don't really think that's the best home or the best use for it. So I think when Kitten first came out, it got thrown into a lot of decks where it wasn't necessarily the best fit, and I think people got a little bit down on it. But now that we have things like Tivit and Atraxa, I think Kitten's starting to find a home and be a little bit better, a little more respected.
So I know you say it doesn't have a place in Blue Farm, but just to throw this out there, and yes, I know it's Comedian. Comedian just won a tournament playing Blue Farm with Tefari Displacer Kitten combo.
I mean, I'm not saying you can't run it or it's bad. I just don't think that's the ideal arrangement of Blue Farm. I mean, if you want to say Ian's a better player than me and he's right, I mean, I can't argue, but like, I don't think the best 99 of Blue Farm has Kitten in it. I don't think it's a terrible choice. I don't like see a list that goes Blue Farm and go, or a Blue Farm list that has Kitten and go, disregard. Like, it's not like that, but like, I don't think it's really one of the best 99 in there. At least it wasn't for a long time. Maybe the meta shifted or something. I don't know.
I'm not disagreeing either. I'm not saying it's better one way or the other. I'm just pointing out that it's humorous that this came about.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think Kitten, in certain decks, though, absolute masterpiece, and Atraxa is one of them.
Yeah. Any deck with Dockside, it's just a slam dunk.
Alright. That's our number 6. Honestly, our number 6 are least spicy so far, because it's just everyone else filling in the gaps of the other things. Number 7, for me, it's a Malcolm deck. I'm gonna say Malcolm Tana, but honestly, it's just like Malcolm. Number 7 is Malcolm whatever. Malcolm Tana, I think, is probably the most consistent of the Malcolm lists. Grixis Malcolm is also very good. Malcolm Timna plays very differently, but is also a very powerful deck. But honestly, number 7 is just Malcolm. Malcolm whatever.
I mean, I kind of wanted to do something like that, but decided not to. Like, I think the back end of the top 10 and like maybe into the top 15 is where most of the Malcolm decks go. I think they're very good. They're not the best of the best, but Malcolm is just such a good piece in the command zone, and it's just so easy to create value and then combo with him and just do it again and again and again. Like, the resiliency of those decks is amazing. Malcolm Tana can like just try to win like 3 turns in a row sometimes, and that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, you put it in better words than I could have, so...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite as high as I have the decks, but like, yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say number 7 or so is Malcolm. I think that's a decently reasonable take to have.
I absolutely would have no problem putting Malcolm slightly lower, but it deserves the top 10 spot in my opinion.
It does, and I'm kind of with you there, because for my number 7, I also have a Malcolm deck.
Oh!
Malcolm Timna, to be precise, and my reasoning for this is that I already spoke on Esper being great colors. A lot of the value that Tivit gets, you can also run in Malcolm Timna. You can make treasures and draw cards in the command zone. You can run the One Ring, Talion, all those value pieces. The one thing I think this deck struggles with is win cons. You only have Thassa's Oracle and maybe Mnemonic Betrayal. And I see the deck can struggle in that sense. I think that you can also make an argument to put Malcolm Tana. I like Malcolm Vile a little bit more. Malcolm Ka0s has also gotten results, right? Like, Malcolm's just a good card, and yeah, I agree with the placement.
It's so good you can get results pairing Ka0s with it.
Malcolm Ka0s does some cool stuff. I do think Malcolm Ka0s is not the best. I think 3-color Malcolm is better than Malcolm Ka0s. Although I do find it funny that I'm pretty sure all of us agree that Esper, Grixis, and probably Mardu are the best 3-color pairings. And I have 2 teamer lists in my top 10. I don't know how that happened.
I'll give you Grixis and Esper. I don't know about Mardu. I was never a big fan of Mardu, even in Mardu Summer. I'm like, this is a flash in the pan. Mardu's fine, but I don't know if I'd for sure say it's the third best 3-color pair.
I don't know what you would place above it, though. What would you place above?
I don't know either. It's just I'm not a giant fan of Mardu. I like green too much for my own good, and I think you need an amazing reason not to play blue in this format. So, like, I don't have a great answer for you right now. It's just, like, it just strikes me as, like, not what I want out of 3. It might actually be if I sat down and thought about it. It's just, I don't know. Like, the first 2 I agree with for sure. After that, I'm
just waiting for the day Sultai comes back. I know it's not there now.
I want Sultai to come back. That's my personal favorite 3-color pair. I know it's not the best right now. Like, I would love it if it came back, though. Like, when you said the best Thras deck in the format was Dargo Thras, I think it's actually Thras Tevesh, but
I want it to be.
That might be a Sultai bias there.
No, I want that deck to be better than it is, and maybe one day it will be. I don't think it's there yet, but soon.
I'm just waiting for the rise of the Banana Man.
I do like Tasigur, too. I am one of the Tasigur fanboys.
I think one day Tasigur is going to be a very powerful deck. I think it's just waiting on, like, 1 or 2 printings, and it's going to make it a really good deck.
It's hard to imagine what those printings are, though. I mean, if Hullbreaker Horror didn't, like, put it over the top, I don't know what does.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I would love to. I love when Tasker gets good and you get into the mid game and you're just like playing your opponents off each other and just answering everything. Like, it's the best feeling in the world. The problem is getting there.
Yeah.
Like, I love the deck. I just don't see what's ever going to make it like meta though.
But hear me out. Damia Group Slug.
I had a Damia deck for a long time before cEDH. It was one of my stronger decks. I absolutely adore Damia, but it's not a cEDH deck. It's just not.
I'll take that as a challenge. I've been wanting an excuse. No.
I'm sure you could build a Damia list that'll win in cEDH. I don't think there's that many commanders you could build a list that just has absolutely no chance with, but it's not going to be a top 10. It'll never be on my top 10 list. I just can't imagine what it would take to make Damia top 10 other than banning about 100 other legends.
Not top 10, but fun. Shieldred, some spice. There's some wheels turning for sure.
If you ever make a good Damia list, share it with me because I would love to play it.
All right, Kuma. Enough talking about Damia. What's your 7?
What's my 7? What is my 7? So my 7 is probably a little bit of a spicy take. We just kind of dissed this guy a little bit on a previous podcast, or maybe it was while I was casting the tournament. I don't remember for sure. I got Kenrith at number 7.
I respect it. I think Kenrith has made a huge return to power.
Yeah, and I mean, he's kind of the black sheep of the 5-colored commanders because he doesn't do a lot on his own. He's kind of good when you're already winning. He doesn't really help you win.
It's true.
But, I mean, this one was one that, like, I was fully prepared not to put in the top 10, but I looked at results and was like, oh, this is actually better than I think it is. So what are Kenrith's numbers here? So Kenrith, there's only 67 people playing it on EDH top 16, but it does have a 25% conversion rate. To compare, that's right next to Sisay Weatherlight Captain. I'm like, if Sisay Weatherlight Captain is that high, I don't know if Kenrith is that far behind it. And I mean, I've always thought the deck was solid. And I mean, you know me in colors, right? It's 5 colors. How bad can 5 colors be? It's got to be the third best 5-color commander. Like even if you have some better options, like I think it's just good. You can play the deck a million different ways. You do have that going for you. You sit down and plop Kenrith on the table, and nobody knows what you're doing. Unlike most of the other decks we've named, you could be doing anything from Rule of Law to Turbo Naz. So you got that going for you, for sure. And I just think being 5-color and having that kind of X factor that nobody knows what you're doing with it, and having pretty decent EDH top 16 results, I think it belongs in the top 10. I think 7's a pretty decent spot for it.
I absolutely agree that Kenrith is the third best 5-color. But I feel like if you're playing Kenrith, it's just like, oh, I want to play Sisay, but I want to be able to add Naz well.
I mean, that's not a bad place to be.
It's not. I don't take offense, but just as a spoiler, Kenrith did not make my top 10. It really wanted to. I think that 2 months ago, this deck came out of nowhere to fill the gap left by Thrasios, thanks to Bowmaster. And that's why people are looking at it again. And you mentioned people can build it in a lot of different ways. I don't think that's the case right now. I think people are really looking at it 1, maybe 2 ways, and that's kind of like as a dockside infinite mana outlet.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably 80% of Kenrith decks, but you do have that 20% in the back of people's minds.
Oh yeah, for sure. You don't know if the meta is favorable to those kind of builds, but it does add some variety, which I do like. I didn't include it because I want to make sure this sticks and isn't just flavor of the month. Like a deck that hasn't been played in a while enters onto the scene. People have to adjust to it a little bit. We'll see if it can stand up and ask me in a month or now, and maybe it will make the list.
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable not to have it in the top 10, but I think it at least deserves an honorable mention.
100% agree.
I think Kenrith returned, and then people were like, oh, Sisay is actually good. And a lot of people were like, okay, we play Sisay now instead of Kenrith, because they share a lot of similarities as far as their overall game plan. Kenrith being slightly faster and slightly more individual card value rather than commander value, but they have a very similar play pattern in a lot of ways.
If I can just take a quick aside here, that's what makes making top 10 lists really tough. If Kenrith is super similar to Sisay, can you really say like Sisay's a top 10 deck and Kenrith isn't?
Yes,
it's kind of like the meme I said earlier. It's like, should my top 10 list just be the 10 best Grixis decks? Because even like the 5th best Grixis deck is probably better than most of what people bring to tournaments. I decided not to do that. But, like, I mean, it's one of those things that makes this hard. It's like, is Kenrith really that much worse than Sisay? And if it's not, can you really say it's not top 10? To me, that was kind of a challenge of doing this.
I can and I will. Thank you.
I think there's a bit of a fallacy there, right? comparing Kenrith to Sisay, because they are similar and they're 5-color decks that are infinite mana outlets, but that's kind of where their similarities end. The decks play very differently to a point, and I think that it's more apt to put the fall of Kenrith more on the shoulders of Thrasios Bruce, which is a deck I think is very similar in game plan, cards you want to run. And now that Thrasios Bruce took a bit of a hit and is not played as much, people are now seeing, what can I do instead? And there's this 5/5 commander that I can play that also gives me black now. I just lose my Fierce Guardianship deflecting swap.
Which is a pretty decent loss, but not the end of the world. Either way, I'm going in at number 8 with another one that might be too high, but I think I love the deck. It's a really cool deck. It's a very powerful deck. It's very, I don't know if flexible is the right term, but versatile. Timna Jeska.
If it was decks I liked, it would probably be in the top 10 list. I like that deck a lot. That's like the one Mardu deck where I'm like, yes, respect. And I do think the deck is very good, but like having played the deck, and another guy in my play group like very frequently plays the deck, I've kind of noticed some holes in it. I think a lot of the time it can be very hard to get the game plan that you want. Like you have options in the command zone. You have the ability to kill stacks pieces to do your combo by casting a Jeska. You have the ability to draw cards with a Timna. But like the rest of the deck just kind of feels like a hodgepodge of strategies, and it's very easy to draw the wrong half of your deck when you're playing it. And I don't know that the commanders are quite enough to make up for it. Like I love the deck. I think the deck is good. I think it's probably more of a top 20 deck than a top 10 deck.
I think a lot of people don't build Timna Jeska amazingly. I feel like there's a lot of bait that people go for. In my mind, Timna Jeska is, you have one of the best draw commanders in the deck, or in your 90, the blah, blah, blah. You have one of the best draw commanders in your command zone, if not the best, with Timna. And then Jeska is, in my opinion, the best interaction you can have in the command zone. And is also a combo.
It's up there for sure, yeah. It is an outlet. That is definitely worth mentioning. I didn't mention that.
Yeah. It is a combo, and it allows you to ping other people's boards down. Oh, you've got a Bowmaster in play? I can kill it whenever I want to. I can leave it on the board because it's keeping other people in check, or I can just remove it. And I can also
playing green?
Combo off
Get wrecked, idiot.
Yeah, for real. Legitimately. In a dork deck, you just scoop. Just give up. I think Timna Jeska is a really effective turbo deck that can also mid-range like crazy because of the commanders.
I agree, and you mentioned people not building it well. I do not like this deck as a World Gorger deck. I like this as a Bolus Citadel deck.
Yeah.
We need the Drake meme with a World Gorger and a Bolus Citadel.
I think Citadel's green in this list.
Yeah. No, I like the deck for a lot of reasons you mentioned. I think that it can struggle. Not having blue can hurt it, but you have white and red, which, while they don't stack up completely to blue, can give it a run for its money in terms of protecting your wins.
White especially. White is really good at protecting your wins and shutting people's turns down.
Mm-hmm.
So my 8 was Tivit. That's where I had Tivit.
Oh!
Yeah, that might be a little bit harsh on Tivit, but I think the deck still has a bit to prove. Like, I think the deck is excellent. Like, don't get me wrong. It's very, very strong. But I think it's got a few more pain points in it than people realize. Like, you are still trying to cast a 6-mana commander. Yes, he immediately refunds you 2 of your mana so you can interact. But, like, I gotta ding it a little bit for that. I mean, yes, you got the 1-card combo with Time Sieve, but, you know, there are about 10 million ways to shut off a combo that requires a creature and 5 artifacts. So, like, while that is incredibly powerful, I'm not knocking that at all. I think as the deck gets played, I think it's going to eventually be kind of more of like a Blue Farm RogSi situation where everybody knows exactly how to take it apart. And yes, while the deck protects itself better than either of those decks, I think that, you know, maybe it should be a little higher on my list, but I'm not quite ready to anoint it one of the kings of the format yet. But I think it is sort of heading that direction. But I do think we might see a little bounce back as people get a little bit more familiar with its lines.
I know Tivit's a gangster, but you really just decided to kneecap this Sphinx.
I mean, and like I said, in hindsight, maybe it should have been a few spots higher. I'm not ready necessarily to put it at the high end of the top 5 yet, but I definitely respect the deck. This is in no way me dissing the deck. It had some stiff competition. But if you look at the EDH rec numbers on it, they're not quite there yet. I don't have EDH rec numbers. EDH top 16 numbers, they're not quite there yet. They're a little bit lower than I would have liked. If they were more like Kenrith's numbers or even Atraxa's numbers, I'd have probably moved it a couple spots higher. But where exactly is it on here? It's got 193 people playing it and a 20% conversion rate. The ones on either side of it are Joyra, Weatherlight Captain, and Dargo the Shipwrecker, Thrasios, Triton Hero. To me, it's a little more. That's a little bit lower than I would like to see. Now, I think it's better than those decks by a lot. But to me, its low conversion rate, despite a ton of players, just kept it a little bit more towards the back of the top 10 for me.
Yeah, I think that the deck has struggled a bit as people got more familiar with it, but it had such a strong introduction. Still getting those results for the reasons we talked about before, but I can understand why you put it there. I don't know if I would put Tevesh Crom below it, but I respect it nonetheless.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a hot take, but to me, that was a numbers game mostly, and a little bit of theory crafting.
That's fair.
Neko?
And I also mentioned Crom Tevesh because my number 8 is Crom Tevesh.
Respected.
So yeah, Kuma, you spoke a lot of what this deck can do. 2 value pieces in the command zone. Tevesh coming out early can be really good. Tevesh plus Displacer Kitten can be really strong. I like what this deck does. You sacrifice white, but I think that can help you in certain ways because it lets you pack in more value in the colors you're in. I don't think it's super good, but I like where the deck's at. Maybe I'm coping a bit. Maybe the deck's not as good as I thought, but I really like the combination. Yes, they're 2 5-cost commanders, but easy enough to ramp out a turn 1 or even turn 2 Crom, followed up pretty quickly by the Tevesh.
Yeah, I mean, I think my 3 was probably a little spicy. I'm guessing the truth is somewhere between the 3 and the 8, probably closer to the 8. But I respect the hell out of that deck, and I think it's being slept on. I'm probably a little too spicy on it. 8 might be a more reasonable place for it, but I do love the deck.
No, I agree. It's getting slept on.
Kuma, you've got a ghost pepper over there. It's not just a little too spicy. Yeah, it's a great deck. I respect the number 8, absolutely. I think it could even get up to number 7, maybe number 6. But 3, that's more than just a little.
You think that at 3 is spicy? Wait till you hear my 9.
Huh?
I'm excited.
I'll get my 9 out of the way because it's pretty boring. My 9's RogSi. I'm shocked that it fell this low. It maybe should have been higher, but RogSi deserves the top 10.
Yeah, same thing I just told Neko. I think the truth might be somewhere in between my 2 and your 9.
Yeah, probably. But Kuma, you gotta tell us what's the spice.
All right, so this is my 1-2 color deck that made the top 10. This is a deck I've spoken highly of on podcasts before.
Oh gosh.
And my number 9 is what? I think you guessed earlier Obnixilis was my number. That's not it. It's not Obnixilis, although I do like that deck. I don't think it's the 9th best deck in the format.
Is it Captain Sisay?
It is not Captain Sisay,
okay.
no.
Oh, good.
No, that would be the freaking Carolina Reaper right there. No. As much as I love Captain Sisay, it's not even close to top 10. No, my number 9 is
a deck, but no.
My number 9 is Niv-Mizzet Payroon.
Oh,
I don't think that's spicy at all. I think that's valid.
I mean, it's spicy for me, Mr. 5 color, but yeah, I think 9 is a really good spot for that. That was another one I liked a lot, but wasn't about to put in there until I saw the numbers on it, and that deck actually converts pretty well. Here, let me find it.
I definitely would not put it anywhere near as high as you are, but I do really like the deck. I do think it's really cool. It's probably top 25. I don't know if it's even top 20 for me, but it's a really good list. It's a really cool list, and it has a lot of... I say a lot. It has 2 really good pilots, and then a handful of pilots that will occasionally pick it up that are really good.
I mean, I've seen bad players stumble into wins just from the sheer amount of card draw and interaction that you have. That deck has the raw power to get you there.
The win percentage of a Niv-Mizzet hitting the board and living longer than 1 turn is probably 90.
Yeah, Goto likes to count to 11. With Niv, you only got to count to 6.
And then pray no one has a removal spell as you've changed phases.
Oh no, not with more free interaction than any other deck in the format to protect my 6 mana investment.
You say that, but it happens pretty often.
Oh, of course it happens. I mean, the deck doesn't always win when a Niv-Mizzet hits the board, but I'll say this for it, too. Its conversion rate is 23.81%. The one decks on either side of it are Atraxa and RogSi. Like, this deck converts very well. Like, this deck is not to be trifled with. And maybe some of that is just a couple of good pilots, but the deck just... It's an incredible... Mid-range is better than almost any other mid-range deck, in my opinion. Like, every time I build a deck, I'm like, I think this mid-range is really well. I'll sit down across from a Niv player and be like, no, actually, they mid-range very well. Like, Niv is just like a mid-range power. You think Rhystic Study draws you a lot of cards? Niv is Rhystic Study and, interaction all on one 5/5 dragon. Like, Niv is... 9 might be a bit spicy for it, but, like, I feel if any two-color deck deserves to be in the top 10, it's Niv-Mizzet.
If Niv wasn't triple red, triple blue, it would absolutely be in the top 10. It is
easier to make that than you'd think.
Well,
it's not easy. It's not. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy, but like it's easier than people think it is.
So, yeah, I don't think it's top 10 per se, but I agree with everything you've said, Kuma, and why you've placed it where you did. One thing about Niv is, I talked about earlier, a deck that can keep up, keep pace, even get ahead. Niv checks all those boxes. Despite its steep mana cost investment and the ease of removing it from the field, Niv allows you to be a control deck that refills your hand. Like, not going negative on resources by being able to counter spells and threats at the table can't be understated for a control deck.
No, definitely not.
Plus you deal damage along with
Yeah,
that.
and it's when anybody instance, right? So, like, your opponents try to interact with Niv, you draw a card, then you interact back and you draw another card. Meanwhile, you're picking off the board. We like Bowmasters, right? Niv's the OG Bowmaster, right? He picks guys off left and right when people draw cards.
Plus a one-card win con, multiple one-card win cons in the deck.
Oh, yeah, you have a one-mana card that basically wins with your commander. Like, okay, and it's not bad otherwise.
Well, you do need to cast another instant or sorcery. There is a little setup you have to do.
Yeah,
there,
the deck runs
like
50 of them. The deck runs something like 40 or 50 instants. It's crazy. Like that's not really a
or anyone else needs to cast instant or sorcery. I don't know what you're considering that as a 2-card combo. Like
I'm not saying it's 2-card. I'm saying it's a little bit of investment.
Yeah, that's like saying a little bit. That's like saying Thras Consult is a 5-card combo because you need 3 lands too. Like,
no, it's a good list. It's a good deck.
It is. No, I don't hate it for sure.
All right, well that's probably my 10's a little spicy, but not as spicy as that. So you guys go with your 9s, I guess.
My 9 is Timna Jeska, and caveat with this, I considered Niv-Mizzet for this. I considered Kenrith. I considered Dargo Thrasios for this spot. Like, I wasn't sure what I wanted to put here. I think I like Timna Jesk a bit more, and it's like the only non-blue deck that would have got on my list, so I'm fine putting it there. I think for not being blue, it does a lot of what this meta demands right now. Being able to get draw engines, be able to keep pace, removal in the command zone, card advantage in the command zone, combo in the command zone, all good things that these other decks that I've talked about offer as well. And I think that I was never, and still am not, a fan of Mardu Summer because I just don't think it was actually a thing. But with all the hype around Dihada, I think Timna Jeska was kind of in its shadow, getting really good pieces and new innovations that make this deck play well. I'm a really big fan of Dylan's list from Play to Win. I think he does really well with that deck and probably influenced my decision here as well.
You've said pretty much everything I agree with.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think Timna Jeska is a lot better than Dihada. I'm not a fan of Dihada at all. Like, I know it worked reasonably well for a while, and its numbers aren't terrible, but like I can't imagine playing Mardu for that card. I don't even run that card in Sisay. Like, that's how much I don't like Dihada.
I think it's cracked in Sisay, but as a commander, I see it, but I don't jive with it personally.
I think it's unnecessary in Sisay. Like, I don't think you're wrong to run it, but I don't think you ever really need it. Like, one game in 30, it's like, I wish I had exactly Dihada, and it's like, I don't think it's worth a slot.
Depends on what your
topic.
It depends on what your build is, but yeah, it is off topic for now.
Well, we've got through our 9s. We're down to our last deck in our top 10. And in my number 10, I have Pixel and Tuca. I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say, you have what? I know I haven't heard of like the vast majority of commanders because of the way WotC is, but like what?
No.
That
The
would be
pilots,
Tyam.
Pixel and Tuca. No, I do not have Tyam.
Neither.
I considered Tyam as the one and only stack that has any value. Like, legitimately, don't play any other stack in the format right now. Tyam's the only one that comes anywhere close. Like, but the problem is, we're talking about how it's like we can't just let one good pilot be the declaring of this is a good deck. Pixel and Tuca are absolutely insane. And so I wanted to give them an honorable mention because basically it was them and I think one other pilot that took Tyam and just made it a crazy deck.
Yeah, him and the other person was Pauper Fanatic. That's their old username, but they won a couple Mox Masters with it.
Yeah, so I wanted to give an honorable mention to Tyam, but when you've got pilots as good as that, like Pixel and Tuca have been bringing ham sandwiches for the past few tournaments and still nearly top 16ing, so my number 10 is Atraxa. Atraxa, we've all talked about it. Atraxa is just really good. I think Atraxa has the most room for growth on my top 10, but I didn't want to put it like crazy high because I do think it has some weaknesses and it has some things that haven't been figured out about the list yet. Although, I'm going to say something spicy here. I think Atraxa finally has a reason not to run ad nauseam. Like a valid reason. I think the printing of Beseech and what's the ferryman's name?
Talion.
I think the printing of Beseech and Talion together has given enough reason where I understand people not running ad nauseam.
It moved the needle for sure. I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
I'm not saying it is correct not to run ad nauseam, but I understand not running ad nauseam. I think both of those getting printed, if you're wanting to play a long control-y type of Atraxa and just playing both of those in there, it's like, okay, I get that. I understand.
You say that. I was a proponent of no ad nauseam in Atraxa before Wilds of Eldraine, but that's just me.
And that is just you, and you are wrong. But
it wasn't just me, though. A lot of other people.
No, there's a lot of.
It's like half the pilots. Let's be real. It's at least half the pilots.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of Atraxa players that did not run ad nauseam. It was not just you, but I think with Wilds giving those two cards, I think is enough reason where it's like, okay, I understand not running ad nauseam. It's enough reason where I've considered cutting ad nauseam from Atraxa, and that's saying something. So,
one thing that I kind of want to point to Atraxa that I mentioned with Timna Malcolm, not necessarily great win cons in the deck outside of Thassa's Oracle.
You've got Kitten.
But the outlet there is still Thassa's Oracle.
Depends on the list, but yeah.
You can be whatever you want, honestly, at that point. You're literally going to draw and cast your whole deck.
Fair, but usually outside of Thassa's Oracle, you're not seeing too much. Sure, people could run things like Jace or Labman. I don't know if they technically do, but my point is...
Typically your backup is either Time Twister or what's the card that it's like Elvish...
Eternal Witness?
Eternal Witness, yeah. It's either Time Twister or Eternal Witness loops and just getting infinite whatever.
Yeah, I guess you could go into Finale with that, which isn't nothing. So, yeah. Okay, that's something. My point was, you have a 7/7, and also, so Beats is a very real game plan, which boosts it for me.
No, Atraxa being higher, absolutely valid. I think Atraxa being above 10 would make sense, but I think it's one of the decks that still has a lot of figuring out to do. Which, I mean, the fact that it's this good and is still being figured out is insane.
But... yeah, my 4 was somewhat based on potential. Like, I think 4 is a perfectly fine place to put that, but I think there's a little bit of wishing on the 4.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I think in this case, it's closer to 4 than it is to 10.
Sure. I would agree with that, honestly. I think Atraxa probably slots in around 7-ish. But
That's splitting the difference.
I'm happy with the 6th placement I gave it.
I think, you know what, Neko, you've got the best tier list out of all of us.
Wait, no. Say that. You haven't heard my 10th pick.
No, he has Blue Farm at 4. It's not the best. And you
I was about to say, wait a minute. You put Blue Farm at 4th place.
All right, well, that's your 10. Shall I do my 10 then?
Yeah, you
Go
do your
for
10.
it.
So my 10's a little bit of a spicy number. It kind of ties into something we said earlier in the podcast, where Fetch had Dargo Thras at 5. He said, this is a very complicated deck. You can't just pick this deck up and win with it. So my 10 is kind of in that vein. My 10 is a deck that I think is very strong, also very complicated, and as a result, not very popular. But, I said I wasn't going to do the Grixis all the way down, but, one did slip in at number 10. I have Inalla at number 10.
I don't know. You're hyping up how complicated Inalla is. I feel like either I'm too stupid to understand that it's complicated, or it's not that crazy of a deck.
Well, I mean, it's a typical Grixis deck on one hand, but, you have, 9 or 10 different lines with 17 steps in them to, win the game off, Spellseeker and, 1 mana or something. Or, win if they exile your this piece. So, I mean, it's kind of is Gitrog complicated? The answer is a lot of the time no, but sometimes yes, extremely. And, I think a lot of people get put off from Inalla because they're I have to go through how many steps to win with a Spellseeker? But, I mean, then ignoring the fact that you can win with, Spellseeker and, I think 1 black mana, wins you the game, assuming you have access to every card in your 99. Nothing's exiled or something. It's nuts the kind of wins that deck can pull out. That deck can go from nothing to winning with a single card. And yeah, it's very complicated. My local Inalla player has a freaking little library of little cards with 17-step plans on them. But the raw power is there. That's a deck that if you master, I think it's absolutely nuts. Possibly if you can master it and manage to play something like that for 5 or 6 rounds, could even be the best Grixis deck. But I've dinged it partially on, that being unproven, and partially because some of the lines do get a little bit in the weeds. But I mean, yeah, again, how bad can just Grixis be? I could have easily just picked 10 Grixis Mean Girls and been that's 1 through 10, thread over. So
I do think one of the best things about Inalla is that it's a commander-centric deck where you don't have to cast your commander.
Mm-hmm.
That is nice.
I agree, and I think that the deck does very well, right? It's a deck that if you do not respect when you sit down at the table and mulligan to deal with it, it's going to win turn 2, turn 3, hands down, because with just 4 mana and a Spellseeker, you're off to the races. I don't know
very
why.
Good Inalla pilots are frightening. It's frightening the kind of wins they can pull out of their butt.
I don't even think it's pulling out of the butt. It's just a deck so consistent in that, right? You mulligan for Spellseeker, and then you're can you stop me? No. Barf, I win.
You're a typical Grixis deck that has a whole other gear. The different flavors of Grixis, they all do basically the same thing, but you have a little bit of a spin. If you want to run, Cormello, whatever, you get Saw in half lines. You get that as your little flavor. You run RogSi, you get the ability to run a bunch of cards you can't otherwise because you have Rog in the command zone. With Inalla, your little bit of flavor is, hey, you get these really arcane 17-step combos that let you win off a Spellseeker, which is a pretty powerful card to just win off of, because that card doesn't suck anyway as part of another line.
It's true.
Yeah, Inalla is definitely the most unique Grixis deck, I think. It's definitely the one that strays most from the typical Grixis game plan. I don't know why it doesn't see as much play as it does, and maybe because people are afraid to invest in it.
I think it's intimidating to learn, even though it's probably not quite as hard as everybody makes it out to be. I think that's the main reason. And you have so many flavors of Grixis to choose from that, the one that's 8 years old isn't necessarily the most popular choice.
Yeah, it can be hard to recover on Inalla if you are stopped, though, in the right way. Because, again, you mulligan so aggressively for the Spellseeker. Maybe you don't have anything to back it up with, but there's so much recursion in the deck
I'll
for
say
that very
this.
reason.
If Spellseeker gets exiled, you're a little bit sad. Then you're just a typical Grixis Adnos deck. If it's in your graveyard, you have about a million ways you can win.
Yeah, I guess Grafdigger's Cage is on the rise, so there are some things that kind of hurt it, but I am surprised I don't see that deck more than I do. It's definitely a deck I didn't consider, though, for the top 10, so I like it. It's spicy.
All right,
What's yours?
Yeah, you said you had some extra spicy.
Yeah.
What are we?
So, I'd be surprised if I'll just here. I'm gonna show you.
I'm concerned.
Here.
Oh, we get to see this.
Yeah, we're gonna see it.
Oh!
Get out of here.
Archmage.
No.
Mono
You're not gonna take
blue
this-
Tefari.
If you're not going to take this seriously, man, just turn the camera off. Like, come on.
No!
I knew you would
Explain.
react to this. This deck is cracked. Like, this deck with the one ring is cracked. So, yes, you're playing mono blue. Yes, you're playing a 6-mana commander. There's a lot of things that you think shouldn't make this deck work. But I've been playing it for a couple months now, and it works. Like, the deck does its strategy so well. You have so many combo pieces in the deck. The One Ring, Displacer Kitten, so much that you can do. You can play stacks pieces that normally would be symmetrical, but don't affect you at all. Things like Cursed Totem, Grafdigger's Cage, because you don't care about them. Like, maybe I'm coping. Maybe, like, yes, I don't expect this to be on anyone else's top 10 list. But the deck is cracked, and I wanted to talk about it because I think this is a deck people are sleeping on. You can do extra turns. Like, there's so much you can do in this deck. And it's just wild that once you get your engine going, kind of like what old like Blue Farm used to be, right? You get the One Ring down. You get Tefari. Like, Tefari can come down pretty easily, refund you mana, get you card advantage. It can untap stuff. Like, I know it's wild. I know it's really spicy. I'm not denying that.
Yeah, I'll say this for you. Like, looking at that deck again after One Ring came out is not something I had considered. I think the deck's probably worth another look with One Ring in it. That said, I think this deck is Urza's stupid younger brother, and I hate Urza as a deck. Like, this is not even remotely close to top 10 for me.
This deck punts Urza into the ground, but I get it. I get it.
I'll accept that this is the best mono blue deck. I don't even know if I would agree with that, but
Urza's probably
Neko,
better.
the level of copium that you are on, where you put this as number 10,
it checks all the boxes. This deck is
doesn't check that I have more than one color box.
That's a big box that you're missing out on. That's like
Blue's
half
the best
the
color.
screen.
Blue's the best color already, you know?
Fine, but it's still only one color.
Just a public service announcement. Try this deck. You're gonna see it's cracked. I get that people are non-believers. I was too. I'm just saying.
Neko, that's like me putting Corvold as 5th. Like...
I was waiting for you to say Corvold Fetch,
No,
to be honest.
I wanted to put Corvold in here, and I think people underrate Corvold. I think Corvold is probably a top 25 deck in the format. I legitimately believe that. But that's like me putting Corvold as 5th, and I am sorry, but no. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I'd even put Teferi as top 50. So the fact that it's top 10 for you...
I mean, you made about as good a case of the deck as I think you could possibly make, but I'm not buying it. I don't think this one belongs anywhere near a top 10 list. Maybe I'll be proven wrong someday. It did win a Time Twister once, like, fairly recently, but I just don't see it. I think it probably got a big bump from One Ring more than most decks, but I don't think that's enough to put it in the top 10.
It doesn't look like it should work, but I promise you it does work. Maybe I'm spreading copium. But I couldn't think of a deck I would rather put in above Teferi, which is wild. I didn't think we would be ending on Teferi. I thought we would be starting with Teferi and kind of building from there, but no, we're ending on it.
Okay, coming out of that, whew, we are at the end. Honestly, the podcast went a bit longer than I was expecting, but we'll get to our Bedwed Dead, our closing segment. I mean, this one, I feel like it's going to be a lot more fun for the viewers than it is for us. But I just want to hear what the viewers have to say about this, as our Bedwed Dead will be each of our top 10 lists. And can I just say, Neko, as we were going through this, I was like, I might marry your top 10. your top 10 might be what gets the marry. And then you just had to put in that 10th place.
We found the deal breaker. We found the baggage.
The
Neko,
baggage.
I just want you to know.
Saves all toenail clippings.
That 10th place alone dropped you from wed to dead. Straight up. Like, Tefari. I'm sorry, I cannot leave you alive.
Damn, I thought I hated the deck.
Neko, I am sorry, your top 10 is my dead. And that leaves me and Kuma. And Kuma, I feel bad wedding myself, but your top 10 had just a little bit too much spice for me to have in my daily life. I say that when my top 10 had some pretty crazy spice out there, too.
I mean, if you can't handle me at my best, you don't deserve me at my worst, so it's fine.
I think it's the other way around, but, you know, that works, too.
Yeah, it is, actually. Never mind.
No, I like that.
Delete
me. Kuma, you have some great takes. You have some very spicy takes. And honestly, I don't necessarily disagree with them entirely, but they're just a little bit too spicy for my daily living. Kuma, your top 10 is my bed, and I will be wedding myself, which feels weird, and I don't like saying that.
At least you're not betting yourself. At least yet.
That was the other option. All because of you.
If I'm the reason you listen, if I'm the reason you bed yourself, I guess I can go to sleep happy.
Kuma, please.
Alright, I'll save you. So, my first reaction was, since both of you put Kinnan not only on your list, but high up, you can stand back to back so I can take you both out in a single bullet. But I think we'll avoid that. I think we found someone who's slightly more deserving of the bullet. And, you know what? Like, here's the thing. Like, Neko, I really think I liked your top 10 list better until we got to 10. Like, Fetches was a good list. I think, you know, a couple of the choices on there were pretty questionable, but if I'm being honest, so was mine. But, like, Tefari at 10, I feel like you just saved that for an honorable mention and put a real deck at 10. Like, I know we're being mean to you here, but it's like, that one to me, like, that plus Kinnan at what? You had Kinnan at 2, 3? Like,
Kinnan was 3.
I just... No, the Tefari's just one too many. I gotta dead you. So I'm gonna have to take a page after Fetch here. So, like, honestly, like, I think there's a couple of things I'd like to have back on my top 10 list. I think Tivit's probably a little bit low. I think RogSi's probably a good bit high. Like, but honestly, I think I still like my list just a little bit more than the other ones. Like, not to knock what either of you guys did. Like, your lists are generally good lists. But I think I still like mine just a little bit more, so I'm going to wed my list, which means I guess I'm betting Fetch's list.
I think it would be really interesting if we did build a top 10 together, because I feel like it would get rid of all of our dumb things and mellow it out to a nice, like, good mixture. But that is not as fun.
No. It also would take 6 hours.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we could maybe do it sometime for fun and then throw it on the next podcast for a couple minutes or something, but yeah, not right now.
Just us gladiatorial combat.
The podcast is already gone on the long side. We're not gonna do that here. But it is time for Mr. Tefari himself.
So
Dead yourself.
There's an old game show network show called Baggage with Jerry Springer as the host. You know, we open our cases, right? Kuma has Tevesh Krom at number 3. I have Tefari,
Yep.
right? That's the Baggage. Fetch is the normal one of the group right now.
You say that. I've got Dargo Thrasios at 5.
Dargo Thrasios 5 is some pretty big baggage, my guy. Like,
It's better than the baggage we got. So I'm gonna wed Fetch.
Hey! I don't know if I deserve that, but I'll take it.
Listen, the hate around Tefari. I get it, but drink the punch, drink the Kool-Aid. It's here, it's cracked, right? Like, and for that reason, I will dead my list just so I can be a martyr.
Dang. Wow.
Just because it's Cope, I get that. I'm playing the deck, I'm biased, but the deck checks all my boxes, and I think the rest of my list was pretty solid besides that. So
I completely agree. I liked your list the most aside from 10. If we did the top 9, I was probably wedding or betting you for sure.
I was absolutely wedding you if it was top 9. You know, maybe I'll reconsider. Maybe it makes my top 50.
Listen, you're just gonna be in bed at night and you're gonna hear it, Tefari on the win. But no, I will.
I'm gonna find your birthday, mail you one every year.
Nice. But no, I will bed Kuma's list because I like the spice. You know, little spice in the bedroom never hurt anything.
Honestly, I feel like our top 10 list, while, yeah, we could have put out a more, I'll say, reasonable collection of decks here, I feel like the mix of spice we have is a very nice mix.
Yeah, I think it was interesting conversation, and aside from one very glaring thing, I think most of the choices were at least somewhat defensible.
Yeah, Kenrith on the list, the spiciest of all
yeah,
time.
that was just, I don't know what I was thinking there. Like,
Yeah.
My God, he's royalty. How can I live up to that? Like,
Oh, and on that note, I would like to thank all of our patrons for allowing us to have Tefari on the top 10. Especially Frenchie, That Mandu, Suzu, and the Exterminator. Oh, sorry, I think I missed. Did I miss Tax Auditor?
you didn't say it yet.
Yeah, I missed Tax Auditor. Man, I missed my taxes. I'm gonna get.
Oh God, the IRS
Gonna
is
get
coming for
arrested.
you now. You can't miss the tax auditor.
Nope.
I also want to thank you to all of our viewers for making it this far. Please, if you've made it to the end, I would love to hear your thoughts on our top 10 list. Give us your own top 10 list, obviously, but please, I want to hear your Bedwet Dead. I am looking forward to those comments. Oh, that will bring us to the end of our podcast here. Thank you all so much for watching. If you aren't already, and if you enjoyed this, make sure to either subscribe or follow, depending on where you're watching this. And we'll see you around next time.
See ya.